Number 1 asks us to identify all values of x that make the equation true. So when you have this where you have a fraction set equal to another fraction, remember that you can cross multiply to both sides. Now in this lesson, you actually talked about multiplying by the least common denominator also. So you're multiplying by the x and the x minus 2, and you're doing that to both sides. So you're kind of multiplying it here. You're also multiplying it here. And then this is going to cancel out the denominators. And so that's really what cross multiplication is, because now this x will be gone. So you're really just multiplying. It looks like you're just multiplying the x minus 2 over here. And then on this side, the x minus 2 will cancel. So you just multiplied the x to this side is what it looks like. So that's kind of where cross multiplication works. So we're going to have x minus 2 times 2x plus 1 on this side and equals 1 times x on this side. So we're going to want to multiply or expand this out. And when we do that, you can put this in the box to multiply. I'm just going to distribute the x to the 2x. So that's going to be 2x squared. And I'm going to distribute the x to the 1. And that's going to be plus 1x. Then I'm going to distribute the negative 2 to the 2x. So that's going to be negative 4x. And then negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And then we still have equals this 1x. So now I'm going to be able to combine like terms here. So we're going to have 2x squared minus 3x when we do 1x minus 4x. And then we still have the minus 2 and the equals 1x. So now we see that we have a squared term. So we're going to want to bring this 1x over so that we have everything on the same side. So this is going to be 2x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals 0. And now we're going to want to factor this. And so I'm going to be able to factor out a 2. So when I factor out a 2, I'm left with x squared, because 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. Negative 4x divided by 2 is negative 2x. And then negative 2 divided by negative 2, negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1. So now within this parentheses, we'll be able to look and see if this polynomial factors. And so we would need the factors of negative 1 that add to negative 2. Well, the factors of negative 1 are just 1 and negative 1. And those add to 0, not negative 2. So that means that this polynomial is not factorable. So in order to solve this, we're going to need to use the quadratic formula. And so let's take a look here. And so in our polynomial, our a term is 1, our b term is negative 2, and our c term is negative 1. So remember, quadratic formula is the opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, and then this whole thing divided by 2a. So we're going to plug these numbers in. So the opposite of negative 2 is 2. Plus or minus, we'll do negative 2 squared here. So I'm just going to multiply that out right away. So negative 2 squared is positive 4. And then minus 4 times a times c. And then divided by 2 times 1, so just 2. So then we're going to have 2 plus or minus the square root. And then if we simplify this, so this inner square root here is 4. And then negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times negative 1 is plus 4. So then 4 plus 4 here is 8. And then we still have the divided by 2. Now this root simplifies as well, because 8 is really the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. So 4 times 2 gives us 8. So we're just going to split it like this. And then we still have divided by 2. And the reason we do this is because the square root of 2 is just 2. So the square root of 4 is just 2. And then we still have this square root of 2, which isn't a nice number, and then divided by 2. So now we can divide kind of all of these parts here. So we'll have 2 divided by 2 plus or minus 2 root 2 divided by 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1, and it's 1 here as well. So we get a final answer of 1 plus or minus root 2. So that's our solutions for part A. So I don't know, I'll write it right here. 1 plus or minus root 2. Okay, then I'm just going to move this down so that we can kind of get away from some of that. So this next one, we're just going to cross multiply again. So multiply this up to here. So we're going to have 1 times x minus 1 equals, then we're going to multiply the x plus 2 times this. So we'll have 2 times x plus 2. So this is just going to be x minus 1. And then we'll distribute this 2 in. So 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 2 is 4. So now we don't have a quadratic, so we can bring the x's to one side and the constants to another. So I'm just going to subtract x from both sides. So this will be 0. So I'm left with negative 1 equals, and then 2x minus x is 1x, and then we still have that plus 4. So then we'll subtract 4 from both sides, and we get negative 5 equals x. And now with these, when you have a denominator, you always want to check if this solution will make the denominator 0. So we're looking at this x plus 2 and this x minus 1. So negative 5 will not make either of those 0. So this is a good solution. If it makes either of those 0, then we have division by 0, and that's called an extraneous solution. All right, next one. Again, we'll do the cross multiplication. So we'll multiply the x plus 2 up here. So we get x plus 3 times x plus 2. And then equals, so now we'll multiply this up. So we have 1 minus x times x plus 1. So now we'll simplify here, or we'll expand. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x, so we're just distributing this x into both pieces. Then we'll multiply the 3 into the x, which is 3x, and then multiply the 3 to the 2, which is 6. On this side, we'll multiply 1 times x, which is x, and 1 times 1, which is 1. Negative x times x is negative x squared. And negative x times 1 is negative x. So now we can simplify by combining like terms on each side. So we've got some x terms that are in common here, and we've got some x terms in common here. So this is going to be x squared plus 5x plus 6. And then x and negative x is 0, so we're just going to get 1 minus x squared on this side. So now we see that we have x squared terms, so we're going to want to get everything to the same side so that we can factor. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides. And I'm just going to write it over here. So now I get 2x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 1. So now we're going to subtract 1 to both sides, and we get 2x squared plus 5x plus 7 equals 0. Oh, sorry, plus 5. 6 minus 1, not 6 plus 1. So 6 minus 1 is 5. So now we're going to want to see if this factors, and you check if it factors by multiplying these two numbers together. So we get 10x squared. And then we want to see if we can get factors of 10 that add to 5. And so the factors of 10 are 1 and 10, which adds to 11, and 2 and 5, which adds to 7. So that's not going to factor. So then we're going to need to do quadratic formula again. So our A value is 2, our B value is 5, and our C value is 5. So we're going to do the opposite of B, which is -5, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so 5 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 5. And then this will be all over 2 times 2. Okay, so this will all be over 4. So we have -5 plus or minus. And then in here, we end up with 25 minus, so we'll get -8 times 5, which is -40, and then divided by 4. So now when we look in here, we end up with a -15. So we're going to end up with square root of -15. And you can't do the square root of a negative number is not a real answer. So this means that there's going to be no solutions to this problem. So our answer for C is no solution. All right, then we'll do this last one, and I'll try and separate it from this. So we'll cross multiply. So we'll be doing x plus 2 times x plus 2. Then we'll be doing x plus 8 times 1. So just x plus 8. So we'll multiply here. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 2 times x is 2x. And then 2 times 2 is 4. Equals x plus 8. So we can combine like terms here. So 2x plus 2x is 4x. And then we still have the plus 4 and the equals x plus 8. So then we'll bring these terms to this side. So I'm going to subtract x over and I'm going to subtract 8 over. So we get x squared plus 3x. And then 4 minus 8 is -4. So then we'll check if this is factorable. So we've got a 1 here. So we're just going to look at the factors of -4 that add to +3. And so 4 and -1 will do that. So then this is going to factor to x plus 4, x minus 1. So then we would take each of these and set them equal to 0. So we'll subtract 4 here and we get x equals -4, and we'll add 1 here and we get x equals 1. So now we just want to make sure that we check these solutions back here. And so we got 4, what do we get? -4, -4, and +1. Neither of those make this denominator 0, so they are both solutions. Number 2, Kyron is solving this equation for x, and he uses these steps. So let me separate this out with some lines here. So here's the original equation. Then he goes to this step. And so you can see the original equation here and the original equation here. So he multiplied this to this side and this to this side. So he solves and he gets his answer. When he plugs it in, it doesn't work. So then he says it's no solution. But he did something wrong in his solving. So what is it? And then let's fix it. So when he multiplied to both sides here, you have to multiply by the same thing. So he multiplied only x minus 1 to this side and x times x minus 1 here. So he has to multiply by x over here as well. Okay, you can't just multiply by different things. And so when he does that, so this x minus 1 will cancel, but he'll have x times the 2x minus 3. And then over here, he still has both of these cancel. So the 2 on this side is right. So let's go from here and fix his work. So he should have had x times the 2x minus 3 equals 2. So then he'll distribute in the x here, and he'll get 2x squared minus 3x equals 2. So we'll bring that 2 over to this side by subtracting 2 from both sides. So now we have an equation that we can try to factor. And so I always check first. I multiply these two terms together. So are there factors of negative 4x squared that add to negative 3? And there are. It's negative 4x and 1x. So since this has an a value bigger than 1, I'm going to put this in the box to factor it, because it's not just going to factor 2x and x this time since we have this 2. So I'm going to put the 2x squared here, the negative 3x, and the negative 2. Then I take these factors that add to negative 3x and I put them here, because negative 4x plus 1x gives us that middle term. Now you take and say, what's in common between these two? So they have a 2 in common and they have an x in common. So now we go 2x times what would give us this box, because this times this needs to be 2x squared. So 2x times x gives us 2x squared. 2x times what gives us negative 4x. So 2x times negative 2. And then x times 1 gives us that 1x. So this equation factors to these side numbers, 2x plus 1 times x minus 2. So that's what this thing factored to. So now we can split this up and solve for our solution. So 2x plus 1 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. So we'll subtract 1 from both sides here. So we get 2x equals negative 1. Then we'll divide by 2. So we get negative 1/2 for a solution. And here we will add 2 to both sides and we get 2. So then we'll just go back up and make sure that neither of these are extraneous. So we got 2 and negative 1/2. Neither of those make this denominator 0. So these are our two solutions. Number 3, identify all values of x that make the equation true. So I'm just going to multiply, like this is similar to a fraction. So I'm just going to cross multiply. So we get x squared equals 25. So then we'll just solve this because we can square root both sides. Just remember, when you put the square root in, you get two solutions, a plus and a minus. So positive and negative 5 will both be a solution here. Neither of them make the denominator 0. So they are both solutions. So we'll multiply this x up here. So we're going to get x times x plus 2 is equal to 6x minus 3. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. And then we have equals, whoops, I did not put the x. All right, so then equals 6x minus 3. So we have a squared term, so we want to bring everything over to the one side. So I'm going to subtract the 6x first. So 2x minus 6x is negative 4x. And then we have 0 minus 3. So then we're going to add 3 to both sides. So then we'll end up with x squared minus 4x plus 3 equals 0. So then we'll want to factor this. So we have an a value of 1. So we just want factors of positive 3 that add to negative 4. So that's going to be negative 3 and negative 1. And then when we split this and set them equal to 0, we'll get x equals positive 3 when we add 3 to both sides. And we'll add 1 to both sides to get 1. check these in your original equation. So 3 and 1, neither of those make this 0. So these are both solutions to that equation. Next one, we have, so we'll multiply x times x, which is x squared. Then we'll multiply x squared times 3, so we get 3x squared. So we'll get these on the same side by subtracting x squared. So we get 0 equals 2x squared. So the only way for that to be 0 is if x equals 0. And then we'll check that, and we find out that when we plug 0 into these, that gives us 0 in the denominator. So this is actually not a solution. So there are no solutions to this equation. Then part D, again, we'll multiply this up. So we'll have x times 6x squared plus 18x. And then we'll multiply the 2x cubed here, so we'll get 10x cubed. So then let's distribute the x in. So we get 6x cubed plus 18x squared equals 10x cubed. So then let's get these terms all on the same side. Now, I don't want my first term to be negative, so I'm going to subtract everything over to the right side. So we're going to get 18x squared equals 4x cubed. Then I'm going to subtract 18x squared from both sides. So I'm going to get 0 equals 4x cubed minus 18x squared. So then we'll factor this, and we see that they have a common factor. So both divide by 2, and they divide by x squared. So when I take 4x cubed and divide it by 2x squared, I'm left with 2x. And when we do negative 18x squared divided by 2x squared, negative 18 divided by 2 is negative 9, and then x squared divided by x squared is 1. So now we can set both of these equal to 0 and solve. So this is just going to be 0 because you're going to divide by 2, which is 0, and square root, which is 0. And then here, you're going to add 9 and then divide by 2. So you'll get 9 halves and 0 as your two answers here. So let's check. So we just got 9 halves and we got 0. Well, if I plug 0 into here, that's going to give me division by 0. So that's a bad solution. So only 9 halves is a solution. Number 4 is this the graph of g of x or f of x? So when we look here, we have a lead term of negative x to the 5th. And here we have a lead term of positive x to the 5th. So it's going to depend on which way the branches go when your leading term is negative. So remember, when your leading term is negative, it starts high and goes low. So this one starts high and goes low. So this is going to be the graph of g of x. Number 5, rewrite g of x in this form. So that's just going to be dividing each piece out. So g of x, so we're going to take the x divided by the bottom x, and we're going to take the negative 9 divided by the bottom x, and then we'll simplify. So x divided by x is 1, and then we just have that negative 9 over x. Then number 6, Elena has a boat that would go 9 miles per hour in still water. She travels downstream a certain distance and then back upstream to where she started. Elena notices that it takes her 4 hours to travel upstream, and it takes her 2 hours to travel downstream. Then it says the river's speed is r miles per hour. Write an expression that would help us solve for r. So for this, you want to remember that we have the distance equals rate times time is a formula that we know. And so we're going to set up two equations here. So one is going to be our upstream equation, and then one is going to be our downstream. So we don't know the distance here, but we do know she traveled the same distance. And then we're going to be wanting to look at her rate and her time for both of these. So remember that her rate in still water is 9. So if we're looking at her rate, if she was just in still water, her rate would be 9 miles per hour. Then when she's traveling upstream, she's going to go against the current of the water, so the river speed. So we're going to take her normal speed minus the current since she's going against it. And when she's going downstream, that means the water is pushing her, so she's going an extra speed of the water. So upstream will subtract the rate from her normal speed. Downstream will add the speed to her normal speed. And then we have the time that it took her to travel. So when she was going upstream, it took her 4 hours. And when she was going downstream, it took her 2 hours. So here's kind of our two equations for upstream and downstream. And then we know that these distances are equal. So we can just set these equations equal to each other. 9 minus r times 4 equals 9 plus r times 2, since the distances were the same. So these two things give us the same distance. So this would be the equation that we would use to help us solve for r.